The radical left have indicated very, very clearly their willingness to sacrifice the poor to the planet.
Welcome back everybody to OT Views. Today we're going to be looking at a video between Jordan Peterson and Danielle Smith, who's the Premier of Alberta. They're going to be talking about climate change and different policies that have been enacted and how they have had adverse effects by the left. I do want to show a short disclaimer. I am a fan of Jordan Peterson. I think he's very logical. I think he's able to break down stuff in a very concise manner. And one thing is that when he does, per se, defeat his opponent, it's not in a rude manner, and it's very easy to follow.
To freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable. Well, so the overwhelming proportion of people who are in prisons are male. Now, do you want to equalize that? Just out of curiosity? What about bricklayers? They're 99% male. And we've got about 3/4 of the population now in universities in the humanities and social sciences are female.
Yeah.
Are we going to equalize that?
Big problems.
My refusal to use pronouns because left-wing activists want me to use them has nothing to do with whether or not trans people are having difficulties in society.
So before we dive in, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hope you guys are ready.
The radical left have indicated very, very clearly their willingness to sacrifice the poor to the planet. Right? And this shocked me, actually, because I could see a tension developing between the low energy prices that were clearly necessary to continue lifting the world's poor out of poverty, which you would think would be the primary concern of the left, right? In principle, they stand for the marginalized and oppressed. And in principle, perhaps primarily along the economic dimension. At least that was the classic left that had.
So he's basically saying that the left in Canada, where I'm from, has really shifted more to a more radical side than standing for what they believe in, which is basically just helping out society in general and helping out the underprivileged, low-income individuals and making sure everyone's equal. But they're so far left to pushing for green energy that they're forgetting all about that. He's just saying it in a long, complicated fashion.
That we had dealt with for, a century in the West. But now we saw on the energy and environment front that the nature worship that's characteristic of the followers of Ehrlich, let's say, will trump any concern whatsoever for the inhabitants of Africa, to point to one place in particular, right? Because the Africans are energy poor, as are the Indians, and to some degree the Chinese, although they're rectifying that very, very rapidly. And so it seems to me that there's an unbelievable opportunity for the classic liberals who are willing to divorce themselves from the idiot progressives and the conservatives to say, no, look, if you want a real policy to alleviate poverty, there isn't anything that you can do that even comes close to the provision of cheap energy by whatever means. Now, you want to keep the pollution under control, and then if it is actually the case that increasing wealth at the bottom decreases environmental load, which seems to be the case, or at least you can make that argument, and credibly, then, well, that's a win-win solution for everyone. No more poverty and a wiser populace with regards to environmental issues from the bottom up instead of the top down. That's a good vision. And so is it.
So before I continue, that's actually Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta. She's a very conservative woman. She's butt heads with Justin Trudeau a lot because she believes that Justin Trudeau's really puts his business in provinces where it shouldn't be. So he oversteps what the federal government should be doing. So she really she clashes with him a few times. And honestly, she's actually a very smart woman. I've done a little research on her and looked at her policies, and she's actually not too bad at all.
Well, it's an excellent vision. I'd add one more on top of it because it actually improves the planet from an environmental point of view. And you'd mentioned Bjorn Lomborg, and I think Michael Schellenberger has done good work on this as well. But one of the things that I have heard as I've gone out talking about the value proposition that Alberta has to offer, is I'm told that if we don't provide that secure supply of LNG so that they can be using it for their energy needs, they're actually quite worried in places like the Asian countries and in India, that if we can't provide them with whether it's ammonia or LNG or some kind of hydrogen carrier, that they're just going to have to keep on developing coal-fired.
Of course they will. Of course.
And
and coal has advantages. You can stockpile coal like mad. All you have to do is put it in a pile. It's pretty straightforward. And so, of course, they're going to turn to coal. Why? Because there's absolutely no way that these developing countries, where most of the people are going to be able to withstand the pressure from the population with regards to the necessity of economic growth. And so, well, we already saw this for you, Smith. We saw this in Germany. The Germans took this demented tilt towards green environmentalism, and all that's happened is that their electricity is 5 times as expensive as it should have been, and they pollute more. Not least because they have to burn lignite. That's how it's turned out.
And to his point, which I gotta say, which irritates me the most, especially about Justin Trudeau, is that he never tells the truth when it comes to the expenses of what these climate change policies are gonna do for us. For example, I'm gonna talk about the carbon tax. Everybody knows the carbon tax. Now, he is right that most individuals get more money back than they put in, but that's not the problem. The problem is that everything is going up in prices because the companies don't like incurring costs. They pass it on to the consumers. And when that goes, it affects us. But he doesn't tell you the truth, and the left does not tell you the truth, which I don't like. We're down for these climate change policies, but make it in a way that's affordable for us regular individuals. You can't be you can't be just saying, I'm going to be throwing money here, throwing money there, and not knowing that everything else is going to go up in price.
Lignite, for God's sake, the most polluting form of coal. They shut their nuclear power plants down, which was utterly insane. And so what's happened in Germany is they're more dependent on, like Putin, for example. Their energy costs have spiraled out of control. They're deindustrializing as a consequence, and they pollute more. So, like, the only way that's a victory is if all you wanted to do to begin with was cause as much havoc and disruption as possible.
You know, it's funny you should say that, because one of my MLAs in the legislature, and just listening at what our opponents in the New Democratic Party had to say, he came up with this formula that the progressives have, is that they identify a problem and then they identify a solution that will make things worse. And then they criticize conservatives who have solutions that are actually a lot more practical and may work, and try to demonize the solutions that we take. But you're absolutely right, is that there's this maybe sort of a it's plausible that the approach that they would take would work. It's plausible that if you built out an economy based on nothing but wind and solar and batteries, that everybody would have free electricity, and it would drive prices down, and it would be unlimited because the wind is always blowing somewhere and the sun is always shining somewhere. And if you just interconnect it enough, then it should work. And I think that plausible lie has been at the heart of why it is we've had such dysfunctional policy.
Now, what she said right there, this is why I actually like her. I like both of them. Because when they're explaining stuff, they explain it in a detailed, concise manner. Now, she was basically saying that, of course, it would be amazing if we can pay for energy with all these utensils that we do have through electric cars, electric vehicles, just everything. Our house and units are powered by electricity. But then how are we going to pay for it? Because that's going to run up the electricity bill for every one of us. And then what I've noticed too, especially in the House of Commons, when I see both conservative liberals, all the other parties talking, when the conservatives actually say viable stuff to the liberals, they don't say anything with value back except throwing slurs and trying to emotionally blackmail them, saying we don't care for the future generation. When, like, it's not, no, we don't care for that they don't care for them, but how are we going to afford it? And then and the media doesn't push back on it. That's another thing that holy makes me pissed off. You got to ask these people the right questions. If you don't, they're just going to go along with what they want to do, and it's going to be bad for us. And another thing, especially to everybody here, I'm not no liberal, not no conservative, but come on, common sense is common sense. We do have to, like, there's a lot of stuff that they're doing that is not helping us in any way. And I'm not saying vote conservative or NDP, but god damn, this liberal party that we do have, yo, they have to go. They're not bringing any viable solutions, and our economy is not doing good. And then they're too radical, and it's really affecting us. And that's where she's coming from, that they're selling us a lie, but by using our emotions, of course, that's literally one of the number one tactics when it comes to even just being in sales. When you're able to understand the individuals and use that to sell the product, they're using our emotional feelings to catch us and then sell us a crappy product.
Around how we develop our energy sector. You need to have reliable power. That should be number one. It should go without saying that a fuel source that only works 10% of the time in the case of sun in our market, or 30% of the time in the case of wind, is not something that you can power an industrialized economy on.
But hey, Trudeau, he doesn't think that that's not a worry for him. All I'm saying, look at Houston. I don't know how many years ago that was when it had that awful snowstorm. And there are some houses that were using just solar energy or wind energy, whatever they were using, and they were crushed. How about if that happens here? Now, I'm not saying that Trudeau's going to that extent, but when you're putting all these taxes, trying to destroy the coal and gas industry, yo, you're really fucking us all over. You are fucking us all over. We need to find a way to stop what this guy's trying to do. Because what happens if we have that all time? Fuck, we just had a bad flood in Toronto. And look how our electricity went out. Is that not an example? How about that happens on a larger scale when we need gas and coal? But because of your policies, Trudeau, that we're fucked up like this.
And then on top of that, if you try to add everything onto the power grid so that all of your industrial use has to come from electricity, all your heating has to come from electricity, all your transportation has to come from electricity, at some point it gets absurd and it gets obvious that it is unachievable. But I think that there's this aspirational approach that they put out there, that people want it to be true, and so they continue to endorse policies that are completely incapable. It's impossible to be able to implement them. And it's our job as conservatives to understand where that aspiration comes from. Because I think people are good-hearted. They actually want to have less impact on the planet. We all enjoy our beautiful outdoor spaces. And so we want to make sure that we're not doing anything that's going to impact biodiversity. So I think that there is a human need to be in touch with nature, that they're able to, I think, take advantage of propose policies that simply won't work. So we have to make sure we understand where that human motivation is coming from and say, look, we can achieve that a different way. And then we have to propose what that different way is. And that's what we're trying to do in Alberta.
Well, there's also a shadow side to that, just like there was a shadow side to the fossil fuel industry's presumption that if they marketed themselves in a green way, that would be a net economic advantage to them. That all presumes that the people that you're contending with are playing a fair game. And I actually don't believe that that's the case with much of the environmental nonsense. I feel that way, for example, when I go into a hotel and I see signs everywhere telling me that they're only going to do laundry every 2 days because they're saving the planet. And that isn't why they're not doing laundry. They're not doing laundry because it saves money, and fair enough. But they can cover that with this claim of environmental virtue. And so many of the people who virtue signal on the environmental side, and this is particularly true in the political realm on the left, are doing that not because they care for the environment in the least, not if it came to actually making personal sacrifices for doing something about it. They want to be seen to be the saviors of the planet without doing any of the work, any of the background work.
And this is why I love this guy. He's 100% right. And honestly, I'm not going to even say the liberals. I'll say it's liberals when it comes to the climate change, but that's just every politician for everything. But just going back to the liberals, we have Justin Trudeau and all these people on the left that are saying pushing for all these green policies. Like they're flying jets that destroy that is destroying the ozone layer, but they can fly on that. Why don't they take a bus? Why don't they go by ship? Why don't they canoe there? But hey, just because they're big, just because they're politicians, they know what's best for us. We don't know what to do. We can't decide what we think is appropriate because we know what's best for you. And that's all the left is when it comes to climate change. Just when it comes to climate change. That's how they move. It's that authoritarian stuff. And I don't rock with it. And that's what he's explaining. That's what he's basically explaining, that the people on the left are using that to max, that they want us to do all this, but they're not going to put in the work. And then let's go back to organizations where they can now cut back on so much shit that's going to affect simple workers just in the name of climate change, climate policies, saving the earth. But hey, all I'm trying to say is that I think a majority of us know, or a majority of us know how far we want to be pushed when it comes to the climate change, how much we want to sacrifice. Don't make that decision for us. But hey, man, to the people on the left and the whole climate change policy people, that's their overlord, Justin Trudeau. So there's nothing I can say about that.
Work, any of the research, any of the industrial innovation that would be necessary to carry it out. They want to be seen as experts without noting, for example, well, how the hell are you going to interconnect all the world's power grids together? Where are you going to get the wire? Where are you going to get the metal? And isn't it a problem, not only that wind works 10% of the time, but when it doesn't work, you have to have a parallel energy system in place. And if that's not nuclear, it has to be fossil fuels. And so then instead of having just a fossil fuel grid, let's say, for our electrified economy, you have to have a wind and a solar grid plus a fossil fuel grid. Well, how in the world could anyone with any sense whatsoever think that that constituted an improvement, especially when you also decide, let's say, to take nuclear out of the equation, which is the last thing you do if you actually cared about carbon dioxide production. And so for me, it's not even, there is an element of care with regards to environmental sustainability, but there's a much larger element of being seen, to be seen praying in public, to put it bluntly, to be seen virtue signaling with no effort. And so that NDP in particular are good at that.
Okay, guys, so that was the video for today. So my overall opinion of the topic that Jordan Peterson and Daniel Smith had is that I wholeheartedly agree with them. I don't think that the climate change policies that the Liberal side has implemented in Canada has helped us in any shape or form. I think it's put us back more than it's even propelled us forward. In the aspect of, okay, it might have lowered the greenhouse emissions that we're letting, but it stopped the growth of the economy. He gave the example of how we're going to be able to fit everything that needs to be powered by electricity on one grid, and how is it going to be paid for? It's going to be increased paid by us. We know that a lot of these politicians who implement these plans don't even follow it. So they tell us what to do, but they don't even follow, they don't lead by example. So me personally, I'm not a fan of these climate change policies. I'm a guy who does want to see the climate improve. I believe in global warming or climate change, whatever you call it. But there needs to be better plans for it. The plans that we have right now are holding us back economically, and it's stopping growth. And for me, I'm always with the economy. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And we have a few more videos coming out this week.